Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this episode is very, very important and very famous for Asia Pacific. Not only Asia Pacific, I believe around the world, because climate change cause and effect is very important, and we have world-class a professional for explaining this climate change and this kind of things. We have Mr. James Eid, Professor Viva, Professor David Smith. We have Mr. Adam. We have Gail, Madam Gail, and Professor Donalds. I'm sorry that I want to really say sorry that our honorable speakers, Professor Donald father died. I'm really, really sorry, and we pray for heaven according to our religious faith. And I know he is a great man because I saw from the beginning of World Talent Economy Forum how Professor Donald actually support our initiative. Even his father died. I know he's very exhausted. He joined with us. So thank you for your joining. How are you? If you want to share some views about your father's, and definitely we will pray for him. And we are discussing on climate change. Yes.
Yes. Well, yeah, he was 93 years old, and he we expected it, and he went peacefully, and he didn't have any horrible disease or anything. He just sort of wore out. But it is kind of interesting because he is the one person who knew me, always. And so it is kind of a big hole. You don't really expect it. You kind of think, well, it's not going to be that big of a deal since I knew it was going to happen. He's been on hospice for a month or so, but I posted it out on Facebook, and I've gotten about 400 people. Many of them knew him. He was very, very nice guy. So lots of people are sad. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Definitely, we pray for him and pray for your family. Hopefully, I don't know, like how even when I lost my father, uh, he was 67 years old. So definitely, in any age or any point, it's very painful. So I directly want to go for the this cause and effect on climate change. We have our climate change activist. I want to start from Professor Viva. Professor Viva, we will discuss on cause and effect on climate change. Uh, Long time you are discussing based on the scientific informations and other things, and this kind of awareness actually very, very important, not only for Asia Pacific, even in Africa and other developing nations. So how do you want to analyze different cause and effect for our audience?
Sure. The heat wave problem, bumping up against too many molecules in the atmosphere, creating chaos for us now, is very apparent to everyone. It's really a simple equation where we're not ventilating our heat. We're not reflecting it properly, and it's not escaping properly. So it is sticking around and bumping up against molecules and water, and creating eddies and currents and chaos and exacerbating storms. So, our ultimate solution is going to be involving the removal of some of the molecules so that the heat can escape. And while we have also got the approach of shading the planet as well with geoengineering, we're also going to have to be removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere in some quarter of the planet. This is what we think needs to happen as well. So it's really a ventilation problem that is putting the squeeze on all our different microclimate and regional climate systems. That is the underlying cause behind all the drought, the desertification, the inclement weather forcing, the collapse of the polar vortexes. So that's where you want to start, is understanding that those greenhouse gases have to be removed because they're the underlying cause. So that's what I would open with.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry. Climate change is one of those areas where we have a lot of history to look at, beginning to go forward with it. One of the big things as I begin to look at climate change is the complexity of it. Climate change is actually one of the most pressing issues of the 21st century. And really, there's no easy fixes to go there. If I begin to extrapolate the climate change and look at the different scenarios going forward, there's a lot of different ones in how we begin to get there. Normally, we think of only carbon dioxide as one of the things that's pushing climate change. However, there's many other elements which go there, and reducing carbon dioxide is just one of the approaches that we need to take forward as we deal with climate change. And it's interesting, sometimes some of our solutions are a great 2 steps forward, and the unintended consequences of some of those is 1 step backwards. And if I look at something like electric vehicles are great concepts, but then some of the ways we're beginning to produce the power to change them actually is increasing the CO2 emission above what a normal gasoline engine would be. A great example I've seen on a recent trip was there's this whole stack of charging stations, and each of them had a diesel engine hooked up to it to generate the power to the charging station to charge the electric vehicle. And I actually searched that and found out that equates, the output from that charging station equates to a petroleum driven car only getting 2 miles per gallon. And as you look at the climate change, it's actually adding to it versus reducing it. So you have to begin to look at these unintended consequences as well. But climate change is a complex system. And to deal with climate change in this century, we have to attack it as a complex system problem. And we have to attack it as a global problem. If I make changes here in Austin, I can impact my local, but it doesn't impact really at the large scale climate change. So each of us can do our part. Each of our cities, states, nations can do their part. But it really is going to take a concerted effort from all of those on a global basis to really have a major impact in reversing climate change. So I think, Sharif, that's the best part of it is it's a complex system, but it is one that we have to take global action on.
Thank you. Thank you. We have our climate change activist, Madam Gail. So Gail, how do you want to analyze the cause and effect for this climate change?
Well, I obviously agree with both David and Viva on, scientific terms. That's I think the underlying cause of all that we're facing right now, which really is the collapse of civilization and society as we've known it, is greed, narcissism, U.S. exceptionalism, where we feel that this country can do no wrong, not recognizing the hardships we've created around the world that go hand in hand with, some of the good that has happened. The hierarchy of racism and classism that has been around, some would argue since the beginning of time, but it's definitely been magnified since the creation of the United States, founded on slavery, founded on stealing land and genocide. That has continued throughout, our time. And honestly, we've never evolved beyond that. This country was not created to ever have equity. We still don't have equity. We walk around pretending that we're, the greatest country in the world, but maybe that time for us has passed. It's really time for the US to start having humility to start recognizing the wrong that we created and perpetuated around the world. Looking at what's going on with COVID is a perfect example, right? Less than 0.5% of the world's population has been vaccinated, whereas while the US is hoarding vaccines that are spoiling on our shelves, right? We can't even convince our own people to take the vaccine, where people around the world who desperately want them and are dying don't have access because of our greed. Capitalism, right? This great idea that was going to make everybody happy, it's failing. And we need to recognize that. We need to stop being afraid of isms, stop looking at the past, stop saying, oh, well, we don't want communism, and just say, okay, well, we better find something new, because we're at an evolution point for humanity. And if we don't step up to the plate, my kids are screwed. I mean, this is the final call. We're watching everything happen faster than was predicted. I live in the burn scar of last summer's California fires. I mean, I look out my window and all around the redwoods are burnt. I'm one of the few houses still standing around here because we happen to have cell signal. I mean, that was luck, right? We're burning again upstate. We're flooding worldwide. We need a global strike. We need everybody around the world whose job that they're stuck in because they have no choice, because there are no safety nets, to walk off together hand in hand and say, if my job is causing harm to my health, to my children's health, to my community's health, and to this planet, I'm not doing it anymore. I mean, that's really our only hope. We know what the science is. That's not the problem. Technology is not going to save us as long as we keep trashing things faster than we're fixing them. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. We have our another climate change activist, Professor Paul. How do you want to analyze today's topic, cause and effect? If you analyze few cause and how we can solve it, it will be great for our audience.
Yeah, I'll take a different view from a lot of people here, that climate change is complex. It's very, very simple. Okay, all we need to do is to get our governments to stop killing us by subsidizing to the tune of trillions of dollars the fossil fuel industry. Okay, it doesn't matter what else we do.
Glad you can pull her back anytime.
Sorry? If governments continue to, subsidize fossil fuels and say, oh, we're fighting climate change, it's like they're, with one hand, they're patting us on the head, and with the other hand, they're stabbing us in the back. It's very, very simple. I mean, we've loaded up the atmosphere with carbon from our carbon emissions, and we're continuing to do that at ever accelerating rates. And in fact, more carbon, I think, has been put in the atmosphere in the last few decades than was done prior, from the beginning of industrial revolution until a few decades ago. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's extremely simple. We need to, if governments don't get rid of their subsidies of fossil fuels and say that is causing climate change and we're killing the planet because of that, then they're just going to continue to massacre humanity. Okay,
Thank you.
That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Jamsit.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you for the topic and also for assembling the guests, the panelists that you have that have the expertise to talk about this simple yet complex subject. It is simple in that we are coming up against a point of no return, and the pace of change is accelerating. It's not gradual. We're coming up where we're going to say, oh, geez, I wish I did that yesterday, and yesterday is in the past. So we have to start thinking about today. And yeah, America first is America alone. You can't do this alone. We have to do this together. So, we talk about economic systems. Economic systems may or may not be part of the solution, but, the capitalist society, the capitalist way of thinking is not working. There's not going to be an invisible hand that squashes the wildfires or purifies the water for us. So we have to think of post-capitalism. We have to think, some of the Scandinavian countries might be the model that we want to think about how we form an equitable society. But we want it sustainable. one that lasts. And right now, if you continue to poison the oceans, you continue to poison the atmosphere, it will not last. It will not be sustainable. And those that can adapt to the future environment that we're creating are going to look a little bit different from us. And there may not be called Homo sapiens anymore. Homo sapiens might be in a minority, if not extinct, because it's extinction level events, people. This is not something we're playing around with. It's not a joke. It's something that we have to take seriously. And you start with yourself. What can I do? What can I do myself? And I can do certain things, and you think, well, it doesn't matter that much, but it does. You start to change yourself, you change those around you and your sphere of influence, and they change others. And it keeps going, and you never know where it ends. But yeah, these governments have got to change. You've got to stop pouring money into fossil fuel industries. And if you're a stockholder, stop buying their stocks. That'll hit them where it hurts. Start buying something that is green. And maybe you'll make a nickel less. So what? You'll be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So I think that we need a lot of science and we need a lot of passion about this, because it's not going away. And we can't wait for a magic wand to save us. We've got to save ourselves, and it starts with yourselves. And then influence those around you. Anybody that gets to hear me speak will hear me speak about this. So thank you, Sharif, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, how do you want to analyze this climate change cause and effect?
Thank you, Sharif. Well, being an Englishman, I have no choice but to take some kind of interest in weather and climate, since it's a very much subject for people to start conversations, and it's ubiquitous in English small talk and British small talk. People who come here noticed it's a favourite topic here. So my brother works down in the Met Office next to, actually, in this country, to a lovely, traditional, and beautiful city by the sea. And I find weather fascinating on an aesthetic and sensory level as well. And there are quite famous locations in England, like the town of St Ives by the sea, were popular with artists because of a unique, recognisable kind of light, daylight and sunlight, because of characteristic molecules, dust and sand unique to the place. And I noticed differences in weather and atmospheric patterns between this time and the present, and from when I was growing up in the 90s, which is a bit uncanny. We have quite extreme seesawing of weather in England in the space of a single day, like a hailstorm in the morning, sunshine in the afternoon, and then a thunderstorm by bedtime. So I can't remember the last time I heard proper rainfall slashing against my window, but we've been getting that powdery fine rain a lot here. But I concur with what Mr. James Eade and the others have said already. This is the last chance hotel, really. But like Mr. Eade said, sustainability is one of the words of focus this year. So if we concentrate on that, then that would be quite promising. And sphere of influence is another helpful term. But, well, climate change is another one of those chicken and egg situations where the weather and microclimates and climates at large are having an influence and an effect on the populations living in them. And then, of course, this affects the trajectories of the population's development, cultural development, technological development, machines, innovations, industries, factories, power stations, and of course, all of these in turn have an influencing effect back up on the weather and microclimates and whole climates at large. So then you get this feedback: X alters Y then in turn alters X. So they're complicated, and I think some people can underestimate how complicated such systems are, as well as how much of an impact these processes have on our daily lives. So it's tricky to predict and simulate and to model, and I think in institutions that work in the fields of meteorology and climatology, you have to use quite powerful supercomputers. So when you illustrate it with such tools as like the butterfly effect thought experiment, where it's systems within systems within systems, and orders of magnitude within orders of magnitude, where layers of microscales are stacked in layers of macroscales. So of course, climate incidents pose something of an existential risk to large populations as well. But I'm confident that this particular age of innovation, with some of the emerging technologies and various disciplines and sub-disciplines, will give us more powers of stewardship over forces we didn't have the means to control so much during previous generations. But like a lot of hot topics, it isn't without controversy, and I remember social media being lit up like a Christmas tree when sun dimming was doing the rounds. So it's a case of who gets to make these decisions, one person, a committee. Is it something we can risk being decided more democratically when people involved in decision making don't have the necessary expertise or specialist knowledge? But I do think it's an issue that requires some cross-pollination, where an interdisciplinary approach will be the most effective. And of course, some distinction needs to be made between what climate patterns are natural patterns that would have happened anyway, what patterns are triggered by human settlements and affluent civilizations. Is that a distinction that even matters? Because a natural ice age, for example, is still an undesirable situation whether it's triggered by human technological and innovational overreach or from Mother Nature herself. So.
Thank you. I want to start again from Professor Donald. Actually, for the climate change, if we want to protect climate change, even in China right now, there is a massive flood. Many impact we are observing in developing nations, in not only China, India, many countries, Indonesia, Bangladesh, they have a lot of effect. So in that situations, I just want to know, like, if we want to protect these things, we need to use green technology, we need to change our ecosystems and many more things. And if we want to introduce the green technologies, we need a lot of investment for research, innovations, and this kind of things. As our World Talent Economy Forum, we have engagement with the developing nations. Already we are engaging with a lot of youth communities, schools, universities. They are taking our courses, but fact is that there is not too much of investment on these green technology innovations, as well as from the government side. There is not too much of, yes, big corporations, even in Malaysia, they are discussing on sustainability, they are trying to follow green technologies, but 90% of the people around the world, I at least believe, because we have to work with many people, still they are not aware about these climate change issues, not they are taking too much of initiative, not we are investing a lot of money or funding for research and innovations. What will be the solution in that situation?
Well, I'm not sure that's actually completely true, because China is developing, they're the number one developer of, for instance, wind. We buy our wind
But
generation from China.
one point, not only statistics, we are affiliated with industry. Just I want to add, I will give you chance, because China heavily implementing coal-based power plants, different developing nations, example Bangladesh, example Pakistan, example Malaysia. China heavily utilizing their political power, heavily utilizing their lobby, as well as they are implementing solar projects. Even in Bangladesh, very low. We finished 35 megawatt solar project from 23 projects, because 22 projects government give approval and it's not finished. I'm talking based on experience, not too much of data and what industry doing.
Right.
22 project failed.
So I
China,
hear what you're saying.
yes.
It goes back to what Paul was saying, basically, that I just read a fantastic book about how much lobbying distorts the political system in the United States, which is that, and lobbying happens in all countries, and what that is people from industry basically bribe the politicians to, and like how can we do that? How can we change that? And of course, transparency, like making it visible, like what's going on is part of it. But that's supposed to happen anyway, and it doesn't really happen. Paul's solution of stopping any sorts of subsidies is a very important idea. I know here in California, Palo Alto has the lowest electricity rate of any city in the country. It's 3.4 cents per kilowatt hour, because Palo Alto is hooked up to a solar grid. And I just looked it up and put a link. And while there may be, maybe in Texas, it would be a Texas thing to do to generate solar power by using petroleum, but in a lot of other places to generate electrical power by using petroleum, a lot of other places they use solar power to generate electrical power and charge cars. And overall, the electrical cars use less, make less greenhouse gases than petroleum cars by a large margin. And I put a link to Nature, a Nature article, and Nature is a very well-respected journal. So anyway, that's, you know, that's the core to it. There's this week's Economist is saying that we're probably not going to be able to get to 2 degrees. The things that we're doing right now are not going to be able to limit the increase in global temperature to 2 degrees, which was the hope of the Paris Accords. But what's going to happen at 3 degrees? Well, at 3 degrees, Greenland's going to melt, Iceland, Antarctica's going to melt. The oceans are going to rise 30, 40 meters. Coastal cities are going to be inundated. Bangladesh is going to be underwater. I mean, things are going to be happening that are just so unbelievably awful that we can barely even comprehend them. And I mean, right now in California, it has hardly rained at all in a year. I mean, it's so dry that it's phenomenal. We have no water in our reservoirs. There is no snow, no snowpack this year, which is kind of one of our reservoirs. It was so hot in areas that it's never been hot before. Death Valley was the hottest that it's ever been. It's the hottest place in the United States. It had the heat record. It broke. It made it even with the hottest it's ever been this year. And of course, if you look around the floods in Germany and Austria, you look all around the world, we're getting the most extreme weather. And remember that climate is the basically statistical distribution of weather events. So when you know that climate is changing, when you start getting 1,000-year events every 5 years, then all of a sudden, I mean, that's the statistical distribution of the events have changed. So we can know absolutely that the climate is changing. There's no question about it. So what can we do about it? I think that what people have said about there needing to be political changes is it's very important. We have to get together and find ways that we can work together to get some sort of honesty in our collective efforts. Like governments are ways that we can get together where we can do things collectively so that we can do things like build roads and schools and all the things that we need to do where we work together to do things. But the system that we have right now is broken. And I think that how we can fix that could be several wonderful shows that we could do. But I think ultimately that's the core, because there's just too much. I won't say, I think corruption and greed and things like that kind of paint over what's really going on. I think they simplify it too much. They don't tell what's really going on. So I think we can talk about it more. I'm a little not as sharp as usual because I couldn't sleep too well last night because my dad died yesterday.
Yes. Thank you. Professor Paul.
Yes. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they do these massive reports every 7 years or so. So we're due for the next reports, and they divide it up into these massive 1,000-page documents. 3 of them specifically. Working Group 1 is the science basis. Working Group 2, adaptation. and there's another one on mitigation. So anyway, the first report, the Science Basis Working Group 1 report, was leaked to the public, to the media, parts of it anyway, about a month ago. But the actual report release date is August 9th. So it's coming up soon. And if they're honest, you know, it's hard. It's a bit sometimes with collective reports that many people are involved in, you know, where you have to vote on sentences. Is this sentence going to be in or not? And it's scientists voting. You know, getting scientists to agree is like herding cats. Sometimes it's very difficult. But, you know, if the report is honest, totally open, candid, then people are going to be shocked. And, you know, maybe, you know, if this document gets widespread coverage and publicity and so on, then it will get more and more people concerned, or at least more and more people will read it, whereas in the past they would just ignore it. Now, you know, if your town was just burned down by a wildfire, or if you're living on a river in Germany and you just lost everything, or, you know, if you're in you know, China and you know, your place was submerged, or if you're in the U.S. Southwest and you know, you can't breathe and you just have to stay indoors, you know, in air conditioned, and you know, you're just trying to you know, and if you're in North America, in many parts of North America, you look up at the sun, you know, sunsets and sunrises, and even during the day, and you just see this haze of smoke, which we actually got in Ottawa yesterday once again, you know, from wildfire smoke. Then, you know, if you you know, more and more people are being affected every single day by by extreme weather events, which are directly a result of abrupt climate change, which is manifested mostly in the extremely warm temperatures in the Arctic, which decrease the temperature relative to the equator, which means the jet stream becomes slower and wavier and stuck in place. And in the ridges of these stuck waves, you get the heat waves, and in the troughs of these stuck waves, you get the extreme torrential rain events leading to flooding. And these waves circumvent the planet, and when they shift in phase, you know, if you move from a trough to a ridge back to a trough, that can actually happen every, you know, week or every 4 days or so. You can get what is called weather whiplashing, where you get extreme heat for a while and then the temperature can plummet for a few days and then extreme heat again. So, you know, the statistics of the entire weather pattern system has changed. We can no longer say that it's stable, and we can no longer talk about things like 1,000-year events or 5,000-year events, because they're actually quite meaningless. They only have importance if the climate is relatively stable, and it is not stable at all. And as bad as you may think things are right now, you have not seen anything yet. This is just a taste of what is coming down in the pipes in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. Okay, in 10 or 15 years, if we're still around to talk about it, we'll say that, you know, we won't even remember. We'll think of today as being a very stable climate system, because it's all relative, and basically, you know, the we're not turning this ship around quickly, okay, unless you know, a lot more people become enlightened as to how bad it really is. So, you know, as a person who studies and looks at this stuff every day, the only way to really deal with it and stay sane is to kind of, you know, imagine that you're up, you know, is to compartmentalize it. It's very difficult to do that when you walk outside and you see the effects of climate change in your daily daily routines and stuff. But it's something, there's no point in getting, getting so upset about it that you become depressed and can't function as a person in what you're doing. You have to work on personal care and self-resilience and exercising and find things that you love to do and spend time on doing those things so that you can remain on a stable emotional keel. So, people are always saying we have X amount of time, to deal with this problem, whether X used to be, 20, 50 years, 100 years, and now, it's like 5 or 10 years, right? Meanwhile, 5 or 10 years go by and the same people are still saying we have 5 or 10 years, right? It's a rolling thing. I mean, when you think about communicating like that, that doesn't really make any sense, right? We're undergoing wrenching changes in our climate, and it's going to cause difficulties for us to grow food to supply the world with food. So we're going to have global food shortages, very, very soon, and maybe that will, make people wake up. I don't know. I mean, to have the hope that people will wake up suddenly and do something about this problem, I think that's another, it's dashed hopes all the time, right? So I think the reality is that we've totally messed up our planet, and we're heading in this juggernaut. So what can we do to try to try to reverse course? And I think it's pretty obvious that the people in power that subsidize fossil fuels, for example, our government and the lobbyists, the fossil fuel companies. By the way, I did a survey in Ottawa, and I looked at the lobbyists for the Canadian government, and 98% of the lobbyists were industry-based groups, whether it be fossil fuel companies or mining companies or whatever. And only a couple percent were environmental, non-governmental organizations or individuals. Okay, so politicians sitting at the seat of government are day in, day out. It's a revolving door for industry people coming in, just trying to get policies that favor their industries. And, the whole system is just, if it wasn't destroying the planet, it would be kind of laughable. It's like a Monty Python skit or something. So anyway, this is where we stand. I mean, we're undergoing wrenching changes. They're here already. Okay, what can we try to do to salvage the situation? We have to keep trying, right? It's human nature to keep trying. But to use the language that it's 5 or 10 years, I think that doesn't help the situation. We should say that, and lots of people are saying, well, the time to start was 5 or 10 years ago, right? I mean, it's tough, like trying to put a time frame on it. I mean, just, look out the window and wrenching changes are happening all the time today, right? This is a reality of abrupt climate change. We're getting mass extinctions. We're losing insects. Trees are the bonds, the chemical bonds in plants are breaking apart. It's not that the trees are just wilting and dying. They're actually chemically transforming. They can't survive the high temperatures. And for every degree Celsius we rise in temperature, there's 7% more water vapor in the atmosphere, and that translates to much more intense storms, right? It much more intense weather events, and they're increasing. Extreme weather events are increasing in frequency, severity, duration around the planet, and they're also happening in regions where they never happened before. For example, snowstorm in the Atacama Desert, or a hurricane hitting Brazil, for example, or going over and hitting Europe, right? I mean, things are happening in regions where they didn't before because the whole balance of the energy system changed on the planet. I mean, we've changed the very nature of the air circulation patterns on the planet, the jet stream. We've changed the very nature of the ocean circulation patterns on the planet. The atmosphere brings about 2/3 of the heat from the equator to the poles. The oceans do about 1/3 of the heat. And the actual heat distribution, the forces driving that heat movement, the temperature difference between the poles and the atmosphere has completely changed. So how can we expect anything different from what we're actually experiencing? So anyway, I could go on for hours, but I'll spare you.
Yes, yes. Thank you. No, it's more realistic and appropriate. Professor David Smith, there are many points come. So how do you want to analyze?
Love the different opinions from all the speakers. This is what makes the programs very interesting and make them more actionable as we go forward. Yeah, I think as you look at climate change and some of it, the science looks pretty interesting. You know, it's clear that we will see some of the impacts of climate change for the rest of this century and going forward from that. The impacts can be positive, the impacts can be negative, and we need to, work through those to see how they are. We've seen places like the ozone holes above the poles have begun to shrink. We see others where temperatures continue to rise and will continue to rise some. The increases, though, have not been uniform. And so we're seeing those change factors come in and really begin to affect it. Some of the other effects that are interesting is, on one hand, we're seeing a longer growing period for crops because of climate change. But on the other hand, we're seeing some more extreme effects of weather. We will be seeing more severe hurricanes because of some of the climate change and the impact of the warming waters for that. And for example, this year here in Austin, we broke a record of the longest weeks with temperature below 10 degrees. And that the impact here was severe. And the impact actually for us was kind of interesting because during that storm, the output from our wind farms, both onshore and offshore, dramatically fell. The output from our solar, there's a lot of solar power in Texas, it fell as well too. So it to me highlighted part of the view to say, as we look at the impact, it will be a mixed impact that the regulatory bodies are going to have to deal with and see the pieces on that. I love some of the research that's being done at some of the universities, though, and how that impact is beginning to look beyond just the academics sphere. For example, in the United States at Purdue, they have an excellent program in climate change. But what's really interesting there is the fact that they do these massive outreach programs. They collaborate with professors, not just in Indiana, not just in the United States, but globally, to begin to pull this together. The solution set going forward will take a technopolis approach, where the private sector, the government, and academia do have to pull together and do have to work to look at the different solutions, not just in the point solutions that we tend to go to as we try to apply a Pareto approach to climate change. You have to go broader in climate change. You have to look across the entire ecosystem and how that begins to affect the impact of climate change. The continuing use of water as a cooling agent in many of the ways we generate power and many of the ways we use it in manufacturing and things has an impact in climate change as it gets released back into the ecosystem. You begin to see other elements of the consequences of climate change as well. Some of them we affect for health. Saturday of this week, I was on a beach on the Texas coast, and to me, one of the impacts of climate changes that was real interesting was that our man-of-wars, our other types of things like that, were much less apparent. And talking to some of the scientists who I bumped into from the University of Texas Marine Science Center there, they were telling me that because of the climate change, the migration patterns have changed as well. And the fish migration, the horrible man-of-war migration periods have changed too. And that's one of the impacts. One of the other impacts that really surprised me is they said because of the slight global warming of the last decade, which was 0.51% according to them, 0.51% of a degree according to them, it actually has resulted in some of the fisheries exploding and more fish going back into the ecosystem. And so you see those as well. But my biggest point is it's going to take a whole set of government, industry, citizens, and academia to come up with a problem solution as we look at going forward. This area is also a prime area for entrepreneurship. And, just looking at the ones I know, and I'm sure if I did an internet search, I would find 1,000 more, the number of incubators where responding to climate change is one of their prime purposes as you read some of the statements, and they're dedicated to that. So there's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship in this space too. And I would dare put on the table that there's a lot of opportunity to forge new international partnerships in this area as you begin to look at the pieces coming together. Climate change affects every nation in our world today and should be a prime way to collaborate on a level where we put some of the differences behind each other and go forward with that.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Professor Viva, you are engaged with innovation research, and your company actually contribute a lot. So how you want to motivate the developing nations, government, corporations to invest more on climate change research, related research, and they can innovate new technology and they can implement in their ecosystem. I personally believe, from my personal experience, this is the major challenges. Big companies, definitely they manage. Example, in Malaysia, Sunway is the largest corporation. They believe in sustainability, they implementing it. But fact is that 90% in grassroots level, as they are not directly connected with these big things, things are not progressive. So
yeah,
what your thought?
They're not. And I honestly believe, after having watched this for 25 years, with a technology that is almost 2 decades in the making, that it's going to take more suffering, more bad news, more damage before the governments actually change. And I'll just describe to you what I think the general picture looks like for the government with our elected people that are obviously suffering from a lot of pressure by the lobbyists, and enough pressure that they're issuing these fossil fuel subsidies at the same time. So we have that going on right now still today. And another aspect of the government that we don't often look at is the permits. Every government gives permits to different industry for their pollution. They have to pass some checks before they're allowed to release from any smokestack. Say in Canada, you have to pay a fee, and you have to estimate how much you're going to release. Now, if you think about this, okay, we are now overloaded with pollutants in the atmosphere, yet all these governments have been supervising a permitting program that has actually allowed us to get into this trouble. So the permitting function of the government was hugely flawed and failed humanity as well. This is another part, a big leg of the failure, is that the permit providers did not oversee the pollution levels adequately enough by a long stretch, and they're still not doing it. So we also have to remember that the scientists that are in the bureaucracies that give the permits are produced by our universities. So there is some kind of connection where the academics have not stepped up and spoken out and taken the precautionary approach. And it would have been really good, because they could have informed the elected politicians through their normal channels that things were getting out of hand. And I think some of the better politicians would have changed the policy that allows the fossil fuel companies to have subsidies. This patronage of the fossil fuel companies would have been lowered. But, ultimately what we have to all cultivate is incoming politicians who are not going to follow the lobbyist pressure. And, it even involves getting current good politicians to change the policy around lobbying so it is transparent and it's auditable, so that we can all be watching that and help guide the elected officials in and out of office based on their performance. We need to try and all hold them more accountable to that. So the government has been a 3-point failure, not just a 2-point failure, which I think is pretty major. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Madam Gail, what your analysis on this particular point, because we are analyzing some complex point: investment, research, innovation, government relationship, corporate lobby. So what are your views?
I mean, obviously everybody in this conversation has their facts together and understands what's happening. However, if we think that we can solve any of this in the funding dependent world that we live in, if we think that we can solve this as long as profit motive remains at the top of our list, I think we're all just fooling ourselves. I mean, we have created a world that's totally lacking morals. We are living in a world that is so individualistic and so alienated, and we're living in traumatic, abusive times. I mean, and the abusers are the colonizers, right? I mean, the majority of people in this room are white people, right? The majority of us are living in privileged situations. We are not the people suffering most and first. I mean, this conversation is lacking really the people that need to be at the table. And that is the problem that we're facing worldwide. As long as the people with privilege and power and profit motives, whatever may be the case, are the people making the decisions, and we're not hearing the stories of the people most impacted, we're living in a time when the majority of the world is brainwashed right now in one way or another. quote unquote Americans. You know, like there are two continents called America, but the United States of America is so narcissistic as to think that we are America. You know, the United States, majority of people in this room are from the United States. And if we believe that our political leaders are out there to defend us, we're kind of being naive, right? I mean, we're watching billionaires go to space, right? We're watching billionaires who could have solved the pandemic without even feeling it. You know, we're allowing that to happen. The only hope we have lies in the people. And the people who that hope lies with really probably aren't in this room. What we honestly need right now isn't science, it isn't technology. What we need right now is a story of tomorrow that people aren't afraid to wake up to. Because right now we're sleepwalking to the cliff. We need a story of tomorrow that is a time when we are sharing our resources. We're doing all that we can to help everybody survive. I mean, this country was founded right on this myth of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What the hell is the pursuit of happiness? That means nothing to us. We are out there pursuing happiness as we trash everything. We're trashing our minds, we're trashing the planet. The truth is, the reality we're living in right now kind of sucks. And the things that we're clinging to are also killing us and killing others. And that's really where we need to be going with talking. I mean, this is all, there's so much truth in this room, but truth doesn't matter in this day and age. Truth isn't going to save us because people are immune to truth these days. What we need is a new story, a new vision. We need to start waking each other up. We need to recognize, I've got 3 kids. I'm divorcing my husband because all he can think about is what colleges they're going to go to. And I'm like, that doesn't actually matter anymore. What colleges my kids go to at this point in time makes 0 difference because they're fucked unless we can get our acts together as a species, start recognizing that I'm not any better than someone who's starving in the streets. I don't deserve more. My kids don't deserve. Our entire system of the United States is white supremacy. The hierarchy of the world right now is supremacy. And if we can't realize that and stop thinking that we have the right to good schools, good anything, well, other people somehow aren't even human, that it's okay to let Bangladesh go underwater, right? Is that okay? Is that okay? Because we created a society where we don't feel that and we don't care. And we need to wake up our hearts and start feeling and start caring, or there's 0 hope.
Okay, understand. I just want to share. Okay, I just want to share with you 2 things. Number one, we are very much diversified. We have 300 different speakers. This is our 328 episodes. Those who join, let's say today, Dr. Sharita already joins from India, but somehow she cannot manage the time. Second things, even though the local community, they want to arrange the different time, we arrange it. You can observe our show. Let's say this 30 July, we have a very, very exceptional episode from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Indonesia, from China. The key think tank and the key academic persons, those who actually run the policy and the government and the top university, they will join, like from Singapore, National University of Singapore, from Malaysia, International Islamic University, Malaysia, all of the top guys, they will join in World Talent Economy Forum. So we are making all of the activities so much of diversified. So if you have time, just watch our show as well as share, because now at least 100 of different school, college, university, they practically utilizing our content. And those who are utilizing, they are not white people, they are black people, they are Asian people, they are Chinese people, even the European and American people. So we are utilizing. And second things, for the practical world, let's say in Bangladesh, I'm Bangladeshi, but I do not like to fail. Even I fail, I try. Even I fail, I try. For the climate change. This is one of the very good information I just want to share, because we are not arranging this kind of discussion. We are taking too much of action, because last 12 years of time we are doing many activities. We develop operations, then I come here and engage with this discussion, because discussion give you the new thought process, new strategy. Even our partner, our World Talent Economy Forums, we finish like 35 megawatt solar projects in Bangladesh. I do not know how do you think it's so difficult. If you visit Rupsha, you can find our solar projects. I'm just sharing our projects. This one 35 megawatt. It's in Rupsha. It's already installed. It's already finished. I'm just sharing the pictures with you. Just a moment. Okay, so let's discuss. I'm sharing our projects information here. This is our projects. For country like Bangladesh, it's extremely challenging. But in between 9 months, even this COVID period, we finish it. Next, we are moving with 100 megawatt projects, and I want to say, if you join in our team, you can see how much action oriented we are. We are not only talk or discuss or just working as a think tank. We are very much action oriented, and we have very successful business organizations, government people. There are many good things. There are many good things around the world. Some people are good, some people are bad, but we are connecting all of the good things together. So this is our objective. World Talent Economy Forum, I can promise you, it will be very much action oriented, and maybe some point we fail, but I'm sure we will try our level best. And our next initiative is our university. So we are starting our undergraduate, masters, and PhD program. I can swear you, I can give you the guarantee, even if we get 10 students or 10,000 students, everybody will be the active learner from the climate change activities and other things, and they will apply their knowledge in real world. That's why we focus from education to projects. Gail, if you have some interesting thought, I love to learn.
Yeah, no, I need to sign off, so I just would like to make a closing comment. And first of all, I mean, it's what I'm trying to say isn't to diss anything that's happening in this room. I mean, everybody here, I think, has a good heart, is in the right place. I think, Sharif, your program obviously is doing a lot of good, and that's tremendous, right? I think my fear is we can be distracted by action, in truth, right? Because the scale of change, the urgency of change that needs to happen right now for us to really have hope as humanity is enormous. And I think in some ways, I mean, really, the whole concept of sustainability is a myth, right? I mean, it's really just greenwashing, because every company is going to do as much as they have to do in our current system to look as if they're doing the right thing. And I'm not trying to put you in this boat, Sharif. I'm just trying to say, like, in our larger economic system, but that doing the right thing is falling, as we know, way short of actually solving the enormous problems we're facing, right? There are a whole lot of people that want to do the right thing, but until we as humanity, as a species, realize that the context we're living in right now is the problem, right? This whole context, this whole idea, the idea of the quote unquote developing world, you know, the way we say that is just to make us comfortable with the fact that we've been abusing most of the world for a very long time now. And we can't keep doing that. We can't keep saying that it's okay for the United States to hoard the vaccines, right? It's not okay for our billionaires to get rich off the pandemic and to be planning their escape, right? While the majority of the world is in jeopardy. I mean, we are living in a context that's not working. So it's the total context that has to change. We need to give power to the people. If the people gain power, if the farmers protesting in India, right? If the people gain power, if the people who are suffering gain power, and to do that, we have to take power from somewhere. I mean, there's no such thing as a moral billionaire, all right? We need to recognize that. We need to honestly look at the United States as an example, right? I mean, I was given this copy of the U.S. Constitution because I attended an ocean event the past 2 weeks, and that was all focused on going and trying to talk to one congressperson at a time, which is going to be way too slow, right? I mean, and when I started reading this from the front to the back, and I haven't done that probably ever in my life, and it's still pretty depressing because when you start reading the front of our U.S. Constitution, we're talking about 3/5 of a human, right? We're talking about our right to steal land. We're like, it's lovely the way it's worded, but we the people, we're white, wealthy, landowning men, and that's how the world is still being run. And that isn't going to solve the problem. So, anyways, we need to recognize that the reason we can abuse the planet, the underlying reason that we can abuse the planet, because it's called Mother Earth, and we still abuse women in this world, right? I mean, we need to change the way we think about everything, develop a vision for the future where my kids aren't better than other kids. All kids have a chance to an education. All kids have the right to drinkable water and food. I mean, that's what we need. That's our only choice. As long as we keep defending what we have, the ship is going down and we're all on it. So, anyways.
Excellent. We believe in your views, and we need to work together, because individually my team ability is limited. But when the global community, we work together, we can ensure educations, food, and everything. But definitely we need to work together. That is our objective. That's why we developed this forum, and we all have the same objective. Mr. Jamsit, so yes, how do you want to break the wall?
Thank you, Sharif. You stole my thunder. I long ago got over apologizing for being a white male. That's not a useful way to spend my time or energy. And, but anyone who wants to judge books by their cover, feel free to do so. Most of my foundation is doing work in Africa right now, and China is in Africa. Much more, the presence of China in Africa is much greater than the presence of the United States. And just as a matter of fact, 4 of the 8 panelists here are from the United States and 4 are not. But be that as it may, the thing that we're talking about here, I really want to emphasize it's extremes of the weather, that the climate change is a focus. We have to focus on the extremes, because you can have lies, damn lies, and statistics. And someone will say, well, the average temperature hasn't changed that much. Nothing to worry about. We had a senator come into Congress with a snowball denying global warming. We had a president take us out of the Paris Accords when we desperately need to be working together. So these are the things that we have to focus on. It's the extreme weather patterns. I didn't use the term heat dome last year. I didn't know what it meant. I do now. We had a heat dome over the Pacific Northwest, and the jet stream effects of the jet stream wave that Paul described is exactly right. It causes heat domes and it causes torrential rain. So we had the flooding in Europe that was unbelievable. People were shoveling the mud and the water out of the basements of their first stories of their homes. This is not something we can ignore, but we do ignore it. And we have politicians that ignore it. And why? Because of all the dark money behind it. The dark money that is allowed to influence the system now because of one of the worst Supreme Court decisions with Citizens United, one of the worst since Dred Scott. It allows this dark money to go unaccounted for, and we don't know who's paying for the politicians anymore. So what do? Throw up our hands? Pull the covers up over our head? Go to sleep? I don't think so. I think we got to get into action. And so, yeah, action can be wrong-headed, action can be misdirected, but action is required. And it's action starting with yourself. Get started yourself, see what you can do, and then change the people around you, influence their thinking, and those in your sphere of influence them, and who knows where it'll end. Because the way to change the politics is, listen, regulations are always slow. They're always trailing behind. Regulations are going to be out of date. The pace of change is accelerating. The pace of regulations is just not following suit. So policies are always going to be behind. So we have to think about, what are we going to do? Well, you know what's not slow? Young people are not slow. They're quick. So young people have to get activated. You can say, oh man, guys, your age, you gave us this mess. Oh, boo-hoo. Clean it up. It's your job now. You know, I spent my youth protesting the Vietnam War and nuclear reactors and whatever. We thought we can make a difference in society, and we did. So it's your turn now. Step up to the plate. Make a difference in society. Start with yourself. And elect the politicians that are like-minded, that see the problems the way they really are. There's lots of information out there that's designed to persuade you, not to inform you. So choose the information that is telling you the truth. And is this easy? No, it requires hard work. But if you're going to be playing your video games, you're not doing the hard work. So put down the video games and get to work. Start getting active in your community. Start getting people elected to your local positions where they can have a voice. And then from there, it goes on. You start electing officials at the state level, and then at the government level, the national levels. And if you have a vote, use it. The appalling rate of young people's voting patterns are just that, appalling. So you've got to get active. You've got to get engaged. You've got to make a difference, because it's not going to be up to your children. It'll be too late for them if you don't take action now. So, and do not give in to despair. These are every problem has a solution trailing behind it. And if you just persevere, because every time we think we have a solution, we find a problem with it. Well, every one of those problems can be solved. I'm an optimist at heart, but I do believe that it takes effort, it takes discipline, and it takes a level of passion that you have to get engaged. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to make a difference. Even if you think it's an insignificant, small difference, well, if one person does it, it is insignificant and small. If 1 million people do it, it gets bigger. And if 1 million people, then society changes. So start with yourself and keep growing, and you will make a difference. And this globe, all of the human species upon it, will be sustainable. Thank you, Sharif. Wonderful topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Mr. Donald Steiny raised quite a poignant issue, again in England, or more accurately, the British coast, the coast all around the British Isles and the British mainland. Sees a lot of erosion from waves from the sea crashing against all the cliffs, and seaside settlements where the water eats away bit by bit, and then entire houses and barns collapse into the sea. And when you was talking about politics and systems, yes, the rot sinks quite deep in all directions, unfortunately, and no sphere of human activity is immune from corruption and chaos and things. So I can't help but think that if we are to save ourselves, some level of radical moral enhancement is required, which is still a bit too much of an obscure transhumanist futurist dream. So I second what Madam Gale said about the lack of morals, and as a lover of truth, I hope to see value replaced back onto truth in my lifetime, certainly more than it is now, hopefully. And I give a credit for introducing me to a new word as well, greenwashing. I've not heard that word before, so not heard that term before. So as a hopeless wordsmith, I love novel new words, so keep them coming. And the argument that there is no such thing as a moral billionaire will be interesting to contemplate. So can you get a moral millionaire? But I digress. But I do agree with Mr. James Zeed that being guilty for being a white male is not helpful, and a lot of white men still have lots to offer. But I can understand the grievance, but I just don't necessarily agree with what Madam Gale said. So I align more with Mr. James Zeed about that issue. But so if we take the proverb, one proverb springs to mind, which I think is relevant to the issue. Great people are those who plant seeds to grow trees whose shade they won't be around to sit under. Hopefully I didn't butcher that proverb too much or misremember it too much. And that's a contributing factor, I feel, this lack of long-term foresight, taking into account multiple generations after our time. We have lots of instant gratification that easily corrupts people in positions of power, in positions of trust, to laugh all the way to the bank with complete disregard for their children's children. Or should I say other people's children's children. It's people in coming generations after us who will suffer the most for this short-sightedness, and they will ask, why are we the ones being punished for bad decisions of our forefathers, unfortunately? So, yeah, Mr. James, he made a good point there about, well, it's your turn to take up the mantle now, take up the torch. You know, every generation has had its problems, its things to fight against. And Mr. Paul Beckwith made an excellent point about not getting too despondent about these issues. We will need stable emotional, mental, and spiritual health to be most effective, at our most effective, rather than depressed, despondent. I mean, being depressed renders a person suffering it quite ineffective, and of course, depression affects motivation. And without motivation, no significant changes can be made. And James mentioned this too. An active person with zeal and motivation and an enjoyment of life and fulfillment, knowing that a difference is being made, they are part of something bigger, and getting pleasure from that will be one of the most effective personality types to help us dig ourselves out of this mess. And when you mention timeframes, no matter how late in the day that motivation finally arrives, it is still better to start then rather than wasting more time ruminating over why we didn't start doing something and taking more action before. Forget that for now, or learn the lesson of not procrastinating much longer. Instead of feeding the beast and becoming despondent over how late the hour is, start now. Because if not now, then when, as they say. And it seems that weather and climate don't discriminate between affluent, built-up places like international cities or traditional villages out in the countryside somewhere, more rural, rustic areas and forests on mountainsides. And I think counterintuitively, so-called first world settlements could be more at risk of being more fragile and cause potentially more devastation if a climate incident hits both a city or a less affluent settlement in a poorer nation. There are more people in cities. Buildings are taller, and the higher they come, the harder they fall, as they say. And there's more of a bottleneck effect in cities where people are more concentrated. So that is part of the hubris of the modern human, and we could pay a heavy price for that sin. So hopefully we will turn back the tides very soon. Good topic.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for joining today's session. This topic is really, really valuable for us, and we are trying to generate a like new generations, educated generation. If people are educated, they can solve many problems. So first thing first, we are solving the education problem. So those who join in World Talent Economy Forum, it's not only in Africa, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, as much as possible we are trying to engage with students, and your thought, your process actually helps to generate new nations. We can convince, and now and I'm very much convinced, because honestly day and night we are working, and we want to this is your students in their classroom, and it's 100% free. Our academy and other thing, we do not charge any money from the students, because they need to develop their English communication skills, as well as they have to utilize World Talent Economy Forum, School of Talent Economy, their content and other things. All of the students actually utilizing our content, not only even Malaysia. Already Malaysian government, we do discuss, hopefully by this year we will get 1,000 students only from Malaysia and Malaysian governments. And this way we are actually trying to create a new generation, not only discussion. We are very much optimist, very much hardworking, and we are trying to solve the problem, and education is number one. So your education, your knowledge, your capacity actually extremely important for developing nations, because it helps to grow a new nations, new communities. And these communities, maybe they will join in the corporation in the future, they will join in the governments, politics, government administrations, and they will change the new ecosystem. So that's why our prime objective is to solve the educational problem. Then we want to create some sort of good project. This kind of projects create a good example for our community. Beside that, the healthcare system is very, very important. We will discuss on vaccine issues, vaccine passport issue tomorrow. So hopefully our speakers will add some values. And we have our conference this week on Smart City Conference, and we have our special episode 31st July. Because of timing, we cannot invite many academicians, but these academicians regularly, those who are actually handle around 40 to 100,000 students, regularly. So they are very interested to join in World Talent Economy Forum. So they will join this special episode. Because of timing, always we cannot manage everyone, but it's a continuous process. We will learn from each other. So thank you for your excellent discussion for today's session. Before I finish, I want to go for the concluding remarks. I start from Professor Paul, then Professor David, then Professor Donalds, then Professor Viva, then Mr. Jamesid, and finally Mr. Adam. Professor Paul.
Yeah, there's an old saying or expression that life or joy is in the journey, not in the destination, and I think that's very important to keep in mind when you're working on trying to address the climate change, the climate emergency. We're all sort of living in the now. We expect things to happen immediately. And this isn't the case, of course, with life. It's not the case with climate change. We need to do the right things, and we know, most of us know what the right things are, the right types of action we need to take. And we need to do this and not expect results, because the results, there's a time shift between actions and results, which is obvious with climate change. Things that we do now affect what will happen, far off into the future. We can't expect to see things now. So that's one of the things. You can blame individual people like billionaires and things, but they're really the product of the whole system. And we need to change the system. I mean, there are there are billionaires who are giving away vast amounts of money to causes that they think are just, and they think that they're doing the right thing, and in some cases they are, and in some cases they aren't. But I think just to bash certain groups of people isn't helpful, because these people are the products of the system, right? And the idea, people have a real misconception about billionaires just being able to duck out into space to survive, and that's not the case. I mean, anybody up on the space station needs a team of thousands of scientists and engineers on the ground to problem solve. So, imagine somebody up, much further away, than the space station, right? It's just not going to happen in our lifetimes. It doesn't matter. That idea is just not, it's not going to happen. So billionaires are stuck on Earth as the rest of us are. And, I have some, I have mixed feelings, because growing up as a kid, I was fascinated with the space programs, exploring other planets, landing on the moon, etc. I mean, it was, and as an engineer, I see the technologies that are involved, the very complex development of technologies and the spin-offs. And so I'm very, conflicted. I mean, yes, the billionaires need to spend money on Earth, on solving problems. But if you look at the percentage of their money that they spend on space versus on other things, it's still a very, very small percentage. So, like I said, these people are accumulating vast amounts of money. If you or I were accumulating vast amounts of money, we probably wouldn't be on a program like this. Perhaps we would, if we had it so ingrained in us. But if we were young and coming across this money, we would spend the money on things that we want to advance. So to be blamed by other people isn't really going to change that. Like I said, it's the system that allows them to accumulate vast amounts of wealth that is the problem. That's the real problem that has to be addressed. And there's very simple things that we could do as a society to stop people accumulating vast amounts of wealth, by putting limits on the amount of wealth. They pass a certain number and they don't see any more of that money. That money goes to it goes to solving problems on the planet. I mean, it all comes down to, if you're going to slam the billionaires for accumulating vast amounts of wealth, how about slamming the U.S. military okay, which is getting vast amounts of money to build weapons to so-called defend the U.S. against threats. Well, the threats are abrupt climate change, extreme weather events. So if you want to defend against those threats, then you need to put vast amounts of money towards the scientists and engineers to not build weapons, but to work out technologies and to adapt to climate, to mitigate it, to stop it, to reverse it, and to harden the, infrastructure and the energy systems, right? So, it's easy to just pick a group and slam them, but does that really solve the problem? No, you need to look a bit deeper at what the problem is, and the problem is the vast amounts of money are going into things that are harming and hurting society and people and individuals, and will bring down our societies and civilizations very soon, unless that money is redirected to things that will address the problem and not make it far, far worse, but reduce it. Okay, that's why I get back to so I'll end in talking about the fossil fuel money. Just do a little search on how much money goes to fossil fuel companies, and it's not just direct money. Often it's subsidies. I mean, there's loopholes in the system where they don't have to pay taxes. How can you fathom vast companies like Amazon not paying taxes, right? Like, it's just I mean, it's not we need to focus on the right things. If we focus, and there, of course, it's in the interest of the companies that are. I mean, I guess the question is, one of the memes I saw with Bezos was, does he enjoy zero? He said the best day ever up in space, right? And in zero gravity. I mean, for years he's loved zero taxes. Right? Does he love zero gravity better than zero taxes? I mean, zero taxes for a company making that much money, like the whole system, it's absurd, right? We do the craziest, stupidest things. So look at where the money is going. Look at the money that we pour. The U.S. military just got approved by the Democrats an increase of something like $30 or $50 billion for upgrading and enhancing the nuclear capability. So we just it's not rocket science, right? Just look at where that money is going, and look at how much money is going into making the problem worse, and how much money is going to address the problem. And does it make any sense to put money into addressing the problem when you put 10 times that amount of money into making the problem worse? It's that's how you define, like, it's for the sake of maybe it's not the right term, but it just seems it seems crazy. It seems like it's like yeah, it's laughable if it wasn't so, it didn't have such horrendous
psychotic.
Yeah, it's psychotic. It's schizophrenic, I guess, or psychotic. It's it's great. It's just insane.
Thank you, Professor David Viva. Yes, Professor Viva, then Professor David. Professor Viva,
Okay.
What's your concluding remarks?
Okay, great. That was really a great session today. Thanks a lot for that, everyone. Just what Paul was finishing up there about the politicians, I mentioned this in a previous episode. It's worth mentioning again. I think that we have to really rally to get the politicians to understand that they have to govern wealth, no matter where it comes from. But systemically, overall, broad strokes, they're in charge of governing the wealth and where it's allocated. And that includes, that would address it systemically if they looked at it that way. And the wealth came under their control before anyone else. So that would be one thing that I would suggest for everybody. Also, until we have a better climate justice infrastructure in place, with the litigation that's happening by different individuals trying to go after the oil companies and whatnot. We have to really let the politicians we do have know that we, as the taxpayers, have been made to be on the hook for climate change. We're the ones that are currently on the hook because we're the largest body of people on the planet, and we're all threatened equally. So it really has been handed off to the taxpayer. And the two things are the emissions cost mitigation has been passed on to the taxpayer, and the development and refurbishing of infrastructure has been passed on to the taxpayer due to climate damages. Now, that's not a righteous or just situation yet, so we have to point that up to the politicians as well that are coming on board. They need to know that the taxpayers are really getting stiffed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith.
I'm going to do a non-normal short final remark on this one. Everyone has analyzed this topic so well that the elements, I think, are pretty well known from what we've said today. And climate change qualifies to me as a grand challenge. And grand challenges are problems where there's really not an easy solution path. And so we need to approach climate change in this century as a grand challenge, pull the resources together to attack a grand challenge, put the relationships, the partnerships in place to attack a grand challenge. And I really think that's where we need to go to solve this problem. Do I think it will be solved in my lifetime? Probably not. But we need to make the attempt to move it forward faster. That's my conclusion. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor David Smith, for your continuous support. Professor Donald, I know this is a very tough day for you, but I want to give my thanks from core of my heart. Thank you for your continuous support, and I want to give every speaker your knowledge, your thought is very, very valuable for millions of people. Professor
Well,
Donald
thank you. I want to kind of mention something about what Gail was saying, and I want to tell everybody that Sharif and I actually had a conversation about some of the things that Gail was talking about for about an hour yesterday. And a couple of shows ago, I talked extensively about the problem of merit as basically a value, and the problem is that it becomes circular. So you're valuable if you're a CEO or a top executive, but if you're say, for instance, you're an African American, it's much more difficult. You have barriers to entry. They're probably less likely to hire you for the jobs that you need to get to be at that level. There's far fewer African Americans at the higher levels of management. So then what winds up happening is that people say, well, what's the reason? And then the reason is because they're somehow African Americans are inferior. But that's not the reason. The reason actually is because there's systemic problems, but we must it's a chicken and an egg thing, where what we're doing is we're attributing things to people, and I think that's sort of what Gail was getting at, and she's getting at. She talked about the stories or the narratives, and I think that it boils down to something that Sharif's been talking about all along about education. And when we talk about education, one thing that we talk about when we talk about education is the idea of training people to have good jobs and training people to do effective things so that they know how to be able to create, be good engineers and make good managers, good administrators, and all the kinds of things that will allow them to be productive, good citizens. But another aspect of education is to be able to be aware of what the world around them and what kinds of things are influencing them to make the decisions that they're making in their life. And part of what we want to do in World Economic Forum, in our World Talent Economic Forum, that's what lack of sleep does. I can't remember the name of anything. Is to be able to create people that are aware of the world around them, because in that particular case, that's where we start being able to get the people that understand what the politicians are doing and become people that can elect the politicians that become that make a difference in the world. For instance, in the United States right now, we have a problem, which is that there's a great deal of consolidation in industry. So in the United States, we don't really have free markets as much as they do in Europe. And actually, Joe Biden is addressing this problem. He's trying to beef up our antitrust so that we can start addressing the issue. Cell phone cost about a fourth in France as they do in the United States. And that's because of the consolidation in industry. Well, these have a direct impact on things like climate change, because if the oil industries and the energy industries are very consolidated, they control the energy, and they have enormous power, lobbying power. And so we need to directly address this concentration of power and break these concentration of power up. But as they're not just lobbying the government, they're lobbying us. They're creating stories and narratives that create our belief about what reality is. Because everything that's not immediate, we're not immediately in touch with, we have to imagine what it is. We have to imagine everything that outside of what's right here. And so they managed to create and so what we need to do is to be able to understand ways that we can reimagine or imagine things in ways that are more, that are more human and more valuable to us. And that's the way that we have to, what we have to do to really solve the climate change problem. We have to all, it's a different way of saying what Gail's saying, and it's I don't think that we need to be down on technology. I think that's part of what we need to imagine. We need to reimagine how we need to reimagine technology. I think technology is wonderful. I think science is wonderful. I think all those things are wonderful and part of what we need to do. We just need to start reimagining how they can be. And I think that the bringing people together from everywhere, I think the developed world has a lot to offer. I think that we need that every person has something to offer. And I think that that's part of what World Talent Economic Forum is about, is bringing all of these things together so that we can start to reimagine the future. And that's my closing remark.
Thank you, Professor Donald. So that's why we are developing our board of advisors. The board of advisors, I request everyone, please join. Your contributions will be 100% transparent. This is your organization. This is not, I'm doing something. No, it's a people organization. Those who are our people, they can join in our board. They can join in our core team. We need many, and we will convince the Prime Minister office, the ministries, the government, the corporations, the ecosystem as much as possible. we will do our best. But we need people. It's a teamwork. Like individually, me, I cannot change anything. But as a team, when we move forward, I'm sure there are a lot of good people. Trust me, 90% actually people from developing nations, they are highly honest. They are very good. They love their country. They want to do something. But only thing they need mentorship, they need guideline, they need strategy, they need to know what is the best. They have to know. That's why I always said that if we can develop like educated nations, these educated nations ultimately can solve many things. How you reduce corruption? You cannot do anything. You cannot fight against money. It's very tough. But fact is that if you have a highly motivated, dedicated peoples, you can do it. Malaysia has my friend Sir Sadiq Abdul Rahman. He is doing excellent job. Only is the things education. You cannot fight against government. You cannot fight against corruption, big corruption. They have money. But one thing I'm sure, if you educated people properly, they get a highly valuable thought process and ethical point of view, and these valuable people will change their nations. We do not have to do too much of things. That's why we are very much focused on education. Even the Malaysian government, we are convincing, give them food, give student support, give student scholarship, give student job. We will produce it, and I'm sure tomorrow we're gonna build up our university and our ecosystem. That is the way I think every nations can change their things. So we cannot do much against corruption. We cannot do much for social error. But one thing we can do, this is we can create educated nations. These education nations will solve many things. So Mr. James, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you, Sharif. And I wish you wouldn't downplay your contribution to this, because you're assembling the people that are bringing all of their various knowledge to bear on these topics that you raise. And these are important topics, and these are important points of views to get across. So I really tip my hat to you for what you're doing. And, you know, of course, I take notes throughout your broadcast, and then I can't read my notes. So it's a useless exercise, but sometimes I jar my memory. And I think that the most important thing we want to leave people with is that the climate change is seen in extremes. There are wildfires in Siberia. This isn't normal, people. These extreme weather patterns are part of a global system of climate change. And this is going to take a systems approach to solve. As David keeps saying, this is a systems problem. It is a systems solution that's going to address it. And this means economic systems, political systems, technological systems. And it means people working together in a different way than they have in the past. Now, these are the types of things that I wanted to call our attention to. You know, maybe we need a wealth tax instead of an income tax. You know, there's a variety of ways that we can solve some of these problems. And will we all agree on them? Will we all agree on them in time? I can't tell you. I have a slight preference for optimism. So I think that we can. I know that we can. And I wonder if we will. And it will take will. It will take perseverance, because there are forces in place that will be resistant to the changes that we need to make. These are powerful forces. Don't take them lightly. But do not be discouraged in their face either. Because if there's enough people pushing in the same direction, pulling on oars in the same direction, the boat will move. I've seen it. It can happen. So it must happen if we're going to continue to survive the way that we have taken for granted for a long, long time. Because it's up in the air now. And I can't overstate that. I mean, you know, what's guaranteed to was guaranteed to us by our parents is not guaranteed to our children or their children. You know, it could be a very, very different world that they're living in. Wanted to double back to what Paul was saying about why are we plowing money into the fossil fuels and the military instead of into the resources that we need to solve this problem, this traumatic problem, this catastrophic problem. You know, because you can't shoot bullets at a hurricane. And you can't bomb a drought. The military forces that we're investing in aren't going to solve the problem. So yes, it takes a redirection of where the money that we have Where are we spending it, and why are we spending it? On 20th century problems when we're in the 21st century? Come on, people, wake up. But it's a collective wake up. It's not just me waking up. It's not just you waking up. It's everybody waking up, that we're all in this together. You can't do this alone. And that means cooperation between governments, cooperations between people. Because in the past, the boundaries between us were mountain ranges and oceans. And now they're artificial maps that we draw, the lines on the maps, lines on the globes, lines on the atlases. They're artificial, they're man-made, just like the man-made pollutions that we're putting into our atmosphere and toxins that we're putting into our water to make it undrinkable. Water is life. It's now turning into a commodity, and people are selling water rights now. And water is life, and we are buying and selling it. Come on, let's do something a little bit different, drastically different. And if you're telling me that, this is capitalism is good, well, capitalism was good in the 20th century. Is it good in the 21st century? I'm not pro or anti-capitalism. It's good for what it's good for, and it's bad for what it's bad for. So, if you're telling me that you're a believer in a guy like Milton Friedman, a brilliant writer, absolutely first-rate mind, but he's 50 years ago, 50 years in the past. He's talking about the 20th century, and he believed fundamentally that the courts would take care of whatever the pre-market society got wrong. And we've seen that has not worked. So we can't rely on the courts to fix what's wrong with our free market society. And instead of pursuing our rational self-interest and allowing an invisible hand to solve all these problems, don't believe in an invisible hand. We have to replace our rational self-interest with our enlightened self-interest. And enlightenment means you're thinking of others, and that we're all in this together. And don't pigeonhole me. Don't concentrate on putting us into different categories based on things like our skin color, what country we're from, what language we speak. None of that matters. We're Homo sapiens. We're part of the same species. And we have to start thinking like that. My last note is indecipherable to me, but I think what I'm going to try to do is just say that, we have a lot more in common than we have differences. And instead of focusing on our differences, celebrate them. Celebrate the differences, because they are the spice of life. And it is not trying to make everyone look the same. Uniformity is not unity. They're two different words. They may have the same root, but they're two different words. We don't have to be the same. Celebrate our differences, but it doesn't matter if you're a little bit different from me, if you look a little different from me, if you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. We breathe the same air, we drink the same water. This is what we need to focus on. How can we eat? How can we continue to eat? How can our planet survive what we're doing to it? And ask not what you can do for the planet, but what, sorry, I butchered my punchline. Ask not what the planet can do for you, but what you can do for the planet. Because we all have to have food. We all have to have water. And we all have to have breathable air. And it doesn't matter what religion you have. It doesn't matter what economic system you believe in. None of that matters when it comes down to food, water, and air. Thanks so much, Sharif. Wonderful topic.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. I'd like to second what Mr. Paul and Mr. James said, and some of the others. I agree with not bashing certain demographics. And I personally thought it was great that Bezos went into space. You will always have the super affluent, and a lot of them are involved with charitable and philanthropic causes. So I'm skeptical with this bias towards billionaires and the super wealthy and the super rich. I mean, it's understandable, but because people who dislike them the most would soon change their tune if they suddenly found billions in their own bank accounts. So instead of jealousy, I try to take inspiration from people like that, wealthy or otherwise, who achieved quite grand projects like going to space. It's an amazing thing. That makes me feel inspired, maybe a little bit jealous. I'd be lying if I didn't, but also inspired, so you can balance that out a little bit. So I think it's a bit discourteous to make demands on people and what they should do with their money. whether the person on the receiving end is a millionaire, a billionaire, or a trillionaire. Then I suppose some people could counter that with an argument that, or it's not all their money, but you could talk about that for another time. But to solve billionaire issues, you would need some kind of violent revolution. So people should ask themselves, is that really what you want? But I would like to conclude with a line from Shakespeare: "Things won are done, and joy's soul lies in the doing."
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's sessions. It's really, really valuable for us. This is really, really very interesting discussion today. Thank you, all of our speakers. Please join. Please support World Talent Economy Forum initiative. We can ensure it will be 100% transparent, and your contribution will change millions of people's life. And honestly, we will do our hard work to execute your thought, your knowledge, your process. And this is the way we will change the communities, and we will minimize the gap in between developed nations and developing nations. And I know developed nations has many, many good peoples, those who are changing their lives. Even I know that Bangladesh is struggling a lot for vaccine and other things. Already they are vaccine from many developed nations. They are supporting their with, and how they get their vaccine. Definitely it's a taxpayer money. Government share with the developing nations people. So thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. But we need to work together. We need to do more work for contributing for the society. Thank you, Professor Viva, Mr. James, Professor David Smith, Mr. Adam, Professor Paul, Professor Donald, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Definitely we will connect millions of talent around the world. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye.